With the hull upright and leveled on the trailer, we trim the sides flush with the rub rails and prepare the interior to receive fiberglass tape on all seams. To tape the seams, we wet each seam with raw epoxy. Then we use thickened epoxy to build a 1/2-inch radius fillet for a smooth transition between the panels. Then we install 3 layers of 6-inch wide 12-ounce biaxial tape. Next, we sand and smooth the hull to receive fiberglass cloth, taking care to feather the edges of the tape seams. We cover the bottom with 3 wide strips of 12-ounce biaxial cloth. While the fiberglass cures, we cut and assemble the 4 floor stringers that will support the raised floor inside the boat. Each stringer is approximately 20 feet long by 8.5 inches tall, glued up in 2 layers of 3/8 inch plywood. We wet out the parts, coat them in thickened epoxy, sandwich the layers together, and fasten it all in place with a pin nailer to keep the parts from shifting until cured.
That's it, we got him.
Next, we make a cardboard template for one of the central floor frames. After transferring the template to plywood, we fit it to the hull. Then we cut the frame into 5 measured sections to establish the proper spacing between floor stringers. With the stringers spaced and leveled properly, we tack them in place using small tabs of thickened epoxy. A day later, we install full-length fillets along each seam, followed by 2 layers of 6-inch wide 12-ounce biaxial tape. Next, we install the frames that run perpendicular to the stringers. With 6 rows of floor frames and 5 pieces per row, this stage entails a lot of work. Screws are used to hold each piece temporarily in proper alignment. Then small tabs of thickened epoxy are applied to tack the parts in place. Finally, the screws are removed and each seam receives a full-length fillet and 2 layers of biaxial tape. This process is repeated for all stringers and framing below the cabin and cockpit soles. The bulkhead that separates the front cockpit from the cabin is installed next. Strips of wood screwed to the face keep the panel straight until it's fiberglassed in place. We cut out and relocate one of the floor frames to make space for an 18-gallon water tank under the cabin floor. Next, we cut and assemble the stringers that support the floor in the front cockpit. A 30-gallon fuel tank will be housed under the forward cockpit. We build a series of low frames to support the tank. Everything beneath the fuel tank floor is sealed with 3 coats of epoxy. Then the floor is epoxied in place. Holes provide access so the spaces beneath can be filled later with expanding foam. Next, we line the upper perimeter of the floor frames with 1x1 cleats of Douglas fir to increase stiffness and support for the raised floor. All compartments get 3 coats of epoxy to seal the wood from moisture. Two-pound density expanding foam is poured into the spaces under the front cockpit to insulate, dampen noise, and stiffen the hull. With the floor installed, we trim the edges flush with the fuel tank compartment using a router. Then we attach the rim for the hatch that will cover the fuel tank. We test fit the hatch and make sure there's enough clearance to allow for fuel tank expansion and the fittings on top of the tank. Next, we make a template to guide us in drilling the 10 holes where our outboard engine bracket will bolt onto the transom. We install an additional floor frame to allow access and inspection of the bolt heads for the engine bracket. The rest of the rear cockpit spaces are filled with foam. Next, we fabricate a set of stainless steel backing plates for attaching the engine bracket. Then we apply 3M 5200 sealant to the perimeter of the bracket and install it on the transom. At long last, we're at the point where we can begin working on the cabin.